In 1896, the British Empire went to war with the island of Zanzibar. The war lasted about 38 minutes. That is not a typo. 38 minutes. Shorter than a lunch break, shorter than a sitcom with the ads, shorter than assembling one bookshelf and quietly giving up on your dreams. And the cause of this war? A man sat in a chair he was not approved to sit in. That's it. That's the whole thing. One guy sat in the wrong chair, and the most powerful navy on earth aimed its guns at a palace and opened fire before half of London had finished breakfast. By the time it was over, roughly 500 people were dead or wounded. A royal palace was firewood, and the British had suffered a grand total of 1 injured sailor. 1. Let's back up. Zanzibar, a small, gorgeous, spice-scented island just off the coast of East Africa. In the 1800s, this was the clove capital of the planet. If you owned cloves, statistically, they came from here. Cloves made Zanzibar rich, and rich islands attract exactly one type of guest, an empire that would love to help. Enter Britain, the world's most enthusiastic, uninvited houseguest. By 1896, Zanzibar was technically an independent sultanate, but in practice, it was a British protectorate. Britain protected Zanzibar whether Zanzibar wanted protecting or not. It's the kind of protection where the protector also decides who's in charge. Which brings us to the paperwork. In 1886, Britain and Zanzibar signed a treaty with one delightful little clause. Every new sultan needed British approval first, a permission slip, a hall pass, but for being king. Remember the permission slip. We're coming back to it. For years, the system ran beautifully because the Sultan on the throne was a lovely, cooperative man named Hamad bin Thuwaini. Hamad understood the assignment. Britain says jump. Hamad asks how high, then thanks them for the cardio. Everyone was happy. The cloves flowed. The tea was hot. Then, on the 25th of August, 1896, Sultan Hamad suddenly died. He was around 40 and had been perfectly fine, healthy in the morning, dead by lunch. Tragic, common for the era, and timing-wise, deeply suspicious, because within hours, his cousin had moved into the palace, declared himself sultan, and started redecorating. That cousin was Khalid bin Barghash. Khalid had opinions. His main opinion was that he should be sultan. His secondary opinion was that Britain could mind its own business. Did Khalid poison Hamad? Nobody ever proved it, but more than one person watched how quickly Khalid had troops assembled and a throne warmed and thought, well, that was convenient. We'll file that under suspicious. Here's Khalid's problem. He had declared himself sultan. He had raised his flag over the palace. He had done everything a sultan does, except the one thing the treaty required. He never asked Britain for the permission slip. He skipped the form. And nothing on earth angers a bureaucracy like a man who skips the form. In the nearby consulate sat Basil Cave, Britain's chief diplomat on the island. Basil Cave woke up on the 25th to discover a brand new sultan installed overnight without so much as a memo. And Basil Cave was, to use the technical diplomatic term, extremely not okay. He fired off an urgent telegram to London. The message was, essentially, there is an unauthorized king, please advise. London was thousands of miles and several hours behind, so Basil had to sit tight, through an active coup, waiting for the empire to check its inbox. Khalid, meanwhile, was not sitting tight. Khalid was fortifying. He packed the palace with around 2,800 defenders, servants, guards, soldiers, civilians. He rolled out his artillery, which was less an arsenal and more a museum tour. A couple of field guns, a Gatling-style machine gun, a Maxim gun, and, my personal favorite, a bronze cannon from the 17th century. A cannon so old it was basically an antique. Khalid was preparing to fight the Royal Navy with home decor. And out in the harbor sat his pride and joy, the royal yacht, the Glasgow. An armed yacht, which, spoiler, is not the flex he thought it was. Here's the thing Khalid underestimated. Britain didn't need to send ships. Britain already had ships. Parked in Zanzibar Harbor on a normal Tuesday were several Royal Navy warships because that's simply where the Royal Navy lived. And more were coming, led by Rear-Admiral Harry Rawson, a man who had spent his career doing exactly this and was, frankly, very good at it. So, while Khalid dusted off his antique, the harbor filled with modern warships, the St. George, the Philomel, the Raccoon, the Thrush, and the Sparrow. Cute names. Terrifying contents. This was a fleet that could delete a wooden palace in the time it takes to microwave a burrito. And every gun was quietly turning to face Khalid's front door. Finally, London replied to Basil Cave. And London's answer was, I'm paraphrasing the vibe, remove this man by whatever means necessary. Green light. Basil Cave, who had been politely seething for 2 days, was now a diplomat with a navy behind him and permission to use it. This is the single most dangerous kind of paperwork enthusiast. So, Basil issued an ultimatum. Simple terms. Haul down your flag, leave the palace, and stop pretending to be Sultan by 9 a.m. the next morning, the 27th. Do it. Everyone lives. Don't, and the ships would decide for him. Messages went back and forth through the night. Khalid, holed up in his fortified palace, genuinely seems to have believed the British were bluffing. Surely they wouldn't fire on a royal palace over a scheduling dispute. Surely this was a negotiation. Basil Cave's position in return, this is not a negotiation. This is a countdown. Khalid reportedly asked for more time and a chat. Britain declined the chat. 9 o'clock approached. And I need you to appreciate the pettiness here, because it is world class. The war now had an appointment, like a dentist visit, except the dentist is a battleship. 9 a.m. arrives. Khalid's flag is still up. No white flag, no exit, no forms file. At 9:02 a.m., the Royal Navy opened fire. And here's the tragic, lopsided comedy of it. Khalid's defenders were brave, but a wooden palace packed with people is not a fortress. It is kindling. The first shells went straight through it. His antique cannons and museum-piece artillery were obliterated almost instantly. The Glasgow, his beloved armed yacht, tried to shoot back at the Royal Navy, an adorable gesture, and was promptly sunk right there in the harbor. Then, her crew was fished out of the water and rescued by the very sailors who had just sunk them. A very British way to run a war. Destroy your boat, then offer you a towel. Inside the palace, it was chaos. The building was collapsing. The flag was still flying purely because nobody had gotten around to lowering it, and Khalid had already made the decision that would define his legacy. He ran. Very early in the shelling, Khalid slipped out the back of the crumbling palace and legged it across town to the one place the Royal Navy couldn't touch, the German consulate. Because Germany was also an empire poking around East Africa, and nothing delights one empire like annoying another. The Germans took one look at the fleeing Sultan and said, in effect, welcome, come in, and no, the British may not have him. Back at the palace, the guns kept firing until the flagstaff was finally shot down and the flag fluttered to the ground. That was universally recognized as the surrender. The shooting stopped. Total elapsed time, about 38 minutes. Some accounts say closer to 40. Either way, it remains the shortest war in recorded history. You cannot watch 2 episodes of your favorite show in the time it took Britain to conquer Zanzibar. The casualty count tells the whole grim, ridiculous story. Zanzibari side, roughly 500 killed or wounded. British side, 1 sailor injured who later recovered. That is the entire British casualty list. 1 man with an injury who got better. For that, the British Empire dismantled a royal palace. Now, to the diplomatic farce, honestly my favorite part. Khalid was sitting in the German consulate on German-protected ground with the British demanding he be handed over. The Germans refused. Britain fumed. No extradition treaty covered this exact flavor of situation. So it became 2 empires glaring at each other over a fence. And the Germans solved it with a move of pure theatrical pettiness. To get Khalid off the island without letting his feet touch British-controlled soil, where he could be arrested, the Germans brought up one of their warships, the Seidler, right to the water's edge. Then they physically carried Khalid from the consulate directly onto a boat and out to the ship, feet never touching the ground. He was, essentially, exported by hand. Britain watched their fugitive sultan get carried off like a very dignified piece of luggage, and there was nothing they could legally do about it. Khalid sailed off to German East Africa, on the mainland. Britain got to work. They found a cousin they liked, a gentleman named Hamoud, and installed him as sultan. And this time, you'd better believe the permission slip was filed, stamped, and framed. The paperwork was pristine. Britain even sent Zanzibar the bill for the shells they'd fired. That's right, they charged the island for the ammunition used to bombard it. A war with an invoice. As for Khalid, He lived comfortably in German territory for years, right up until 1916, when Britain rolled into German East Africa during the First World War and, surprise, finally captured him 20 years later. He was exiled, bounced around, and eventually allowed to live out his days in East Africa, dying in 1927. A man whose reign had lasted about 2 days and whose war had lasted about 38 minutes. So, that's the Anglo-Zanzibar War, the shortest war in history, fought over a missing permission slip decided by a fleet that was already parked outside, ending with 1 wounded sailor, a hand-delivered fugitive, and an invoice for the bullets. If your worst decision this week is smaller than starting a losing war to skip one form, subscribe to Historian Harry. You're already ahead of a sultan.